and a warm welcome to the first of two videos for GM3, Geometry and Measure 3. And in this we're going to look at Pythagoras' theorem, and in particular questions where we don't know the length of the hypotenuse. But first of all, what is Pythagoras' theorem? Well, it's all about this shape here, a right angled triangle. We have to have a right angled triangle, and we need to know the name of one of the sides. Now the right angle will point to that side. See the arrow coming off the right angle there? And that side is called the hypotenuse. We normally use the letter H for it. It's opposite the right angle and it's always the longest side. And the other two sides, we just know those as A and B. Now, the first thing you must be able to do is to identify which side is the hypotenuse. The triangles aren't always in that nice orientation that you see there. So have a little look at this exercise. What I want you to do is to identify which of the three sides in the triangles is the hypotenuse. Okay, so press pause, have a little go, press play when you want the answer. Okay, how'd you go? Let's have a look at the first one. So there's the right angle and it's pointing towards the hypotenuse. Going to the right, look at that one, there's the right angle. That one's the hypotenuse. The next one, there we have it. That one there. And then the last three, we got the hypotenuses as shown there. So the right angle kind of shoots out a little arrow pointing towards the hypotenuse. Now if you didn't get those right, make sure you go back and understand which one's the hypotenuse before you go on. Okay, so let's have a look at the theorem. There's a right angle triangle and there's H for hypotenuse and the other two sides are A and B. And Pythagoras' theorem says that if you got the length h and you multiply it by itself, or square it, that's the same as the length a squared added to the length b squared. And we're going to write it h squared equals a squared plus b squared, or later on we're going to write it like that, a squared plus b squared equals h squared. Okay, and that is Pythagoras' theorem. Now it's actually all to do with areas of squares on the sides, like this. Let's have a little look. So see that yellow square coming off the hypotenuse? Well, the area of that square, which is h squared, is equal to, now see the green one coming off A, the area of that one, plus the area of the green one coming off B. So there we have it, h squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now, in relation to the GCSE, we use Pythagoras' theorem to work out length, so we don't really think of it as areas. We kind of use it to find out lengths of triangles. So let's have a look at a question. Now I'm going to call this a type 1 question, where the hypotenuse is the side we don't know. And these are nice and straightforward. We're going to use that formula, h squared equals a squared plus b squared, and we're just going to put a number in for a and a number in for b. Let's have a look then. Here's our first one. Now it says there, calculate the length of side AB. First thing, we've got to make sure we know which is the hypotenuse. So there's the right angle pointing to the hypotenuse. Now let's write down Pythagoras' theorem, h squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now h is for the hypotenuse, and notice h squared is on its own in the formula. It's h squared equals a squared plus b squared. So the hypotenuse goes on its own in the formula. So the hypotenuse we don't know, it's called AB. So AB squared equals, and the other two sides are 3, and we're going to square that, and 4, we're going to square that. So AB squared equals 3 squared plus 4 squared. Now we're going to work out those numbers. So 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and we're going to add them up. So AB squared equals 25. But we don't want AB squared, we want AB. So we've got to take the square root of both sides. So that gives us AB is the square root of 25, which we know is 5. So there we've used Pythagoras' theorem to work out that length. Right, let's have a look at another example. And this time we've sort of turned the triangle around a bit to try and confuse you. But remember, first step, identify the hypotenuse. And there it is. Okay, the right angle pointed to it. Let's write down Pythagoras' theorem. h squared equals a squared plus b squared. So notice h squared is on its own. And the hypotenuse is the one that we're going to calculate the length of, actually. So that's good. So we've got hypotenuse is AB. So AB squared equals 7 squared plus 12 squared. We could have 12 squared plus 7 squared. It's not important, really. As long as we've got AB squared on its own, the hypotenuse must be on its own in the formula. Right, let's work out those numbers. 7 squared is 49. 12 squared is 144. We're going to add them up, 193. You could actually miss out writing down 49 and 144. You could just use a calculator to do 7 squared plus 12 squared equals, and you get 193. So we want the square root of both sides, so that means AB is the square root of 193. And your calculator will tell you the square root of 193 is 13.89244,399. We normally work to one decimal place, so we will write that as 13.9 centimetres. And we'll say we've rounded it to 1 dp. Okay, so over to you now. You'll notice in your booklet there's 2 little examples, so have a go at those 2 and then check them, and then we can have a look at the exam questions. So press pause, do the first 2 questions, check them, and then we'll move on. Okay, how did you get on? Let's have a look at the first example then. So remember what we do? Identify the hypotenuse. There it is. And then we're going to write h squared equals a squared plus b squared. So h, the hypotenuse, is AB. And 6 squared plus 8 squared, let's work those out. 36 and 64. Add them up, get 100. AB is the square root of 100, which comes out nicely to be 10 centimetres. Good. Let's have a look at the second example. So again, identify which one's the hypotenuse. So that one along the bottom. Write down the formula and put the bits into the formula. So the hypotenuse is AB, AB squared, and we've got 5 squared plus 12 squared. And you could do that in one hit on the calculator, or you could just work them out like I have there. Add them up, 169, square root both sides. So AB is 13 centimetres. Excellent. Now if you've got those 2 right, go on now to the 2 exam type questions. Press pause, work them out, and press play when you want the answer. Okay, so let's have a look at how you got on to the exam type questions. There we go, this one's from 2010. It says, find the length AC, give your answer to an appropriate degree of accuracy. Well, an appropriate degree of accuracy here is 1 decimal place, because that's what they've given their measurements to. So remember the steps. Identify the hypotenuse. There it is. Write down Pythagoras' theorem, and let's fill the bits in. Well, h, the hypotenuse, is AC, so we've got AC squared equals 3.6 squared plus 7.3 squared. Doesn't matter if you got 7.3 squared plus 3.6 squared, as long as you got AC squared on its own. Okay, let's work them out. There we go, on the calculator, and then we'll add them up. Now, see, I've written 12.96 and 53.29 in red. That's just to sort of underline the fact that you don't have to work them out individually. You could just get your calculator to work out that 3.6 squared plus 7.3 squared is 66.25. So we want the square root of both sides. AC equals the square root of 66.25, which is that, to 1 decimal place, 8.1. And there we go. Notice that's 4 marks on that question. So it's nice marks for something that's not too terrible. Let's have a look at number 2. Now, number 2, they've tried to confuse us. They tried to throw us off the scent by having a story of this speedboat race. Competitors travel 8.5 kilometres south, then 7 kilometres east, and then back to the start. Calculate the total distance. What you're going to have to do is notice in the diagram we've got a right angle triangle and that we've got to find out one length. So then you think, okay, finding a length, right angle triangle, Pythagoras' theorem. Okay, so first things first, identify the hypotenuse. Oh, sorry, first things first, let's call the start point S. So we'll give it a letter. So let's identify the hypotenuse. There it is, opposite the right angle. And so we're going to write down the theorem. H squared equals a squared plus b squared. So the hypotenuse, well, we've called the start point S, so the hypotenuse is SB squared equals 8.5 squared plus 7 squared. Work those out and add them up. 121.25. So SB is the square root of that, which is 11.0113577. We'll work to one decimal place, 11.0 kilometres. Now the temptation now is to think that we finished. We haven't. We'll write it in, but look, calculate the total distance. So now we'll just say, okay, the total distance is 8.5 plus 7 plus 11, 26.5 kilometres. And there we are. We finished the question and we finished the video. So that's the first one of 2 videos about Pythagoras' theorem. It's bye for now, and I'll speak to you on the next one.